the world's writers will walk through those gates, and if you hang around, you get a chance to talk to them.
I'm interested in conversations that deal with things that matter, but real, how do we live our lives?
First of all, make climate change personal in your life. The second step is get angry and get active. And the third step, and believe it or not, I think this is the most important, we have to imagine this world that we want to hurry towards.
It's about kindness is looking at people as people and not as I voted this, I do this, whatever it is. There are some people we will never get along with, but most of us are a complex mass of different things.
Hello, I'm Julia Donaldson. Some of you might know me from some of the books I've written, such as The Gruffalo or What the Ladybird Heard. Well, one of the things that I really love normally about coming to the Edinburgh International Book Festival is meeting children who love to read and bringing my stories to life for them on the stage. This year, of course, none of the authors or illustrators can do that. But I am delighted that this year's online book festival is available and free to so many children in so many different places. So I hope that anyone watching has a wonderful time and that it makes you want to read lots and lots of books.
Good afternoon and welcome to Edinburgh International Book Festival Online. My name is Mairi Kidd and I am Head of Literature at Creative Scotland. My first job today is to say a big thank you to Baillie Gifford for sponsoring this afternoon's event and all of the festival's children's programme. Of course, my main job today is a very exciting one because I'm here to introduce not one, not two, but three incredible authors to talk about three very different but equally inspiring books. Now, I think many of you may already be big fans of these authors, and I hope you'll join the chat as the event goes on to ask any burning questions you have for them. But I also very much hope that some of you listening haven't discovered these authors yet, because you have a huge treat waiting for you. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce them to you. Cressida Cowell is the Waterstones Children's Laureate 2019 to 2022. The role of Children's Laureate is awarded once every 2 years to a very special author or illustrator of children's books to celebrate their outstanding achievements. Cressida is an author and illustrator who has sparked imaginations across the globe with the 12 novels in the brilliant How to Train Your Dragon series about a Viking boy and his dragon. Cressida grew up in London and spent her summer holidays on a small island off the west coast of Scotland, where she says she first began to write stories. How to Train Your Dragon's been adapted into 3 feature films, and Cressida has followed it up with the amazing Wizards of Once series, including Never and Forever, her brand new book we're going to hear about today. Welcome, Cressida. How are you? Where are you?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be talking to you today. I'm I'm actually in my kitchen. Normally I broadcast from my shed, but the internet isn't good enough. So I'm in my kitchen in my house in London.
And I think you have a dog with you who might join in today, if we're lucky.
Yes, I do. She's currently asleep, but she may join in. Anything could happen. That's one of the exciting things about broadcasting from your kitchen.
Absolutely. We don't have enough dogs at Book Festival, so I'm very excited. Joining us as well today, we have Eoin Colfer, who was born in Wexford in the southeast of Ireland. And I think Eoin is maybe just a wee bit too old, I hope he doesn't mind me saying that, to have read How to Train Your Dragon at school. But he does say he first became interested in writing stories by learning gripping Viking stories at school. He's perhaps best known for the 8 books in the Artemis Fowl series, which have sold an enormous 25 million copies. Hello, Eoin. How are you today? Where are you today?
I am in my office in Dublin, and I'm very well. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be anywhere, even virtually. It is very nice. And I read the Train Your Dragon book, but actually when we met, where was that? We met at some festival in, I don't know, Scandinavia somewhere.
Oh, yes.
Aarhus. Yeah. Aarhus. I felt so bad. I said, I better read this book. So the next time we meet, I'll be able to say, yes, I like your work, Cressida. So I'm now saying that. So, but I was kind of predisposed to liking Viking books because Wexford, where I come from, that's where the Vikings landed on their takeover of Ireland. And they were not quite as cheery as the ones in your books, Cressida, I have to say.
Really?
And there were no dragons with them, so
well,
I got the mean Vikings.
How do you know? Have you ever been back to Viking times? Maybe
I am, as Mairi intimated, I am that old, so I remember.
Well, that's very exciting for anybody listening. We have an actual Viking with us, or do we? I have my doubts. We do, though. We have 2 quite rare beasts with us in Cressida and Eoin. So we have a current Children's Laureate, and Eoin is a past Children's Laureate. He was Laureate Nanog in Ireland. Apparently, he got a gold medal, which he wears even in the bath. But that's quite exciting. So we have a 3rd author with us. So if we have a past laureate and a present laureate, I very much hope that means we have a future laureate. So
no pressure, Kiran.
No pressure
none at all. And you both wear it so well. I really want it.
So I'll introduce Kiran Millwood Hargrave to you. She first burst onto the scene with her novel, The Girl of Ink and Stars, a beautiful book about a map maker's daughter, with which she won the Waterstones Children's Book Prize. So see, she's already on the laureate track already. Kiran was born in Surrey, and she says that when she was little, her ambition was to be a cat. But sadly for the world of cats, but happily for the world of books, she became a writer instead. And today she's going to talk about her book, The Island at the End of Everything, and also her new book, which isn't even out yet. So we're going to get a sneak peek of a brand new book. So welcome, Kiran. How are you? Where are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm in Oxford in my office. We might get some quality cat rear end at some point, so I'm just warning everyone, because the desk is normally where my cat sleeps and I'm not very good at kicking her off. So
we might have a cat, we might have a dog. Eoin, any possible interlopers from your house?
I have 2 young boys, so well, I say young, one of them is 23, one is 17, so they might come in, and you may just see a hand coming in. And I will put money in the hand, and then the hand will go. That would be the extent of your involvement.
That's welcome, and thank you to you all for joining us today. And what I would like to do is to ask Cressida to kick us off today by telling us about her brand new book. And maybe even, Cressida, would you read us a little bit?
Yes, I will. My brand new book is the last one in the Wizards of Once quartet. It was intended to be a trilogy, but actually ended up being a quartet. And it's about magic. It's set in the Bronze Ages, end of the Bronze Ages, beginning of the Iron Ages, a time in which magic really existed, obviously. Yeah, like dragons did in Viking times, as I was telling you, Eoin. And this is the last book in the series. And so it was really, it was very... I find it very hard writing the last one, because I want it to go on forever. Anyway, but I'm going to read you very quickly a quick excerpt. By the way, at the end, because I have this thing going through all the books where it's who is the narrator and who is the narrator of this story. And so just because I know that lots of people will skip to the end, I put very firmly epilogue. Anybody who has skipped to this epilogue before reading the rest of this story is a big cheat and should go right back to chapter 1, or I get really quite shirty. because I'll know that they'll want to know who the narrator is. But I'm going to read you just a little bit. It starts, oh, by the way, I'm so pleased with how my wonderful designer Sam has made this book. I always think that books should look like sweets, not Brussels sprouts. So look how sweety like. And when you open it up, you have the sort of wild woods underneath, and there's a beautiful love is greater than witches underneath. At the beginning, it starts like all my books. They're pretty snappily. They're in this mine. Can you see? They're in a mine, so underground. And I'm just going to read from the moment. Tsar is map reading. That's Tsar. He's the boy who's got. But unfortunately, this is the moment when they just realise. Oh dear, he realises he's been map reading, but unfortunately, he's been map reading holding the spelling book in the hand with the witch stain on it. And so he said, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Tsar swallowed. Guys, said Tsar, I'm so sorry, but I think we may have a bit of a problem. Wish and Bodkin peered over Tsar's shoulder. Tsar put the spelling book in his other hand, and it was just as he suspected. When the spelling book was in his left hand, the one without the witch stains, the illustrations on the map of the Mine of Happiness changed in front of their eyes. Now the little images of themselves appeared to be crawling in entirely the wrong direction, and the crude cartoons of Wish, Tsar and Bodkin were no longer looking happy, but extremely frightened and anxious. And so this is just the beginning of the book. And they suddenly realise that, oh dear, why did we let Tsar do the map reading? They're going in the direction of something called Beware of the Tatzel Worm. And the chapter ends with Bodkin getting stuck. Can you see?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which is actually my nightmare. I'm not very good with small spaces. I get claustrophobic. So imagining, when people go potholing and things, I just can't understand why you would want to do that. Anyway, they get stuck, and the dreadful smell. This is the end of chapter 1, because things happen quickly in my book. The dreadful smell was now so sickly near that Tsar had to put his hand over his face to defend his nostrils from the ghastly poison of it. There was a horrible pause, and then with startling suddenness, a great clawed hand came shooting out of the darkness and trapped Tsar beneath it. So it starts quite snappily, and then chapter 2 begins 4 hours earlier, because I really like that when you leave people in suspense a bit. So yeah, this is my favourite book actually, it's my favourite book I've written. It's quite a personal book, and there's a bit of a twist at the end. It's not anyway. You'll have to read it. But it's funny and bittersweet, and it's about love.
Cressida, can I ask, are you good at reading maps? Because I think my nightmare is reading a map in a tight tunnel and being responsible because I'm so very bad at reading maps.
Well, isn't that interesting? I'm very interested, a bit like Kiran. I'm, mapmaker's daughter. I'm very interested in maps, and was, as a child, my father was obsessed with maps. He actually loved getting, and my sister is a map maker. She draws maps for a living. She's an illustrator. But my father house was covered in maps, because if you're at sea, you sort of have to know where you are. But he loved getting lost. So it was a kind of constant urge with him to know where he was and to try and get lost. That's what he was doing a lot, trying to get lost. So yeah, I'm sort of obsessed with maps as well.
Well, I love that.
About maps. maps, isn't there?
There is something about maps, and there's also something about the idea of getting lost. And I wondered if I could ask you all a question, because some of the young people listening today will have gone back to school. The schools in Scotland went back a couple of weeks ago, but plenty of listeners will still be waiting to go back to school, and they've been at home for a long time. And maybe they might have been looking for some opportunities to get lost during lockdown in a brilliant story. And I wanted to ask you, during lockdown, have you been thinking about ways to escape through stories? Have you been reading and have you been writing? Anybody?
I'll start. No, you start, Eoin, because I've just been talking.
I think, there was kind of a lot of pressure on writers to get loads done during lockdown. People were saying, you must be getting so much work done. And I actually was. So I was really, really smug about that, and I remained smug. It's probably not any good, but I did a picture book project, which is coming up soon. And then I made the really smart decision to write a play, which I feel now, in retrospect, might not have been the best thing, as all the theatres will be closed for the next 6 months or whatever. But I think when I was really lucky, I was probably on the fortunate end of the lockdown scale, in that my boys are older, and so there's nothing I can teach them that they want to know yet. So, I can't do their math, I can't do their science. So I was really able to just continue working in my really nice office, and things went on pretty much as usual in here. So it was just when I stepped outside into the world, I realized, there's something really unusual and terrible happening. But I think if you have small kids, it was a really tough few months, really tough. And sometimes it was hard for the little kids just to find their own little corner of a room to read quietly. And that's vital, I think, to have that. It doesn't have to be your whole room, but maybe you just sit on the corner of a sofa and put on your reading cap and read. And I do think a lot of kids rediscovered books when they got fed up on some of the streaming channels, Netflix, then they and they maybe picked up a book that they've been meaning to read for a long time. I certainly know I got a lot of more contacts through Instagram or whatever than I had been for a while, with people who just went back to books. So that was a nice, if there was one little tiny silver lining in this miserable time, it was that people rediscovered books, which was nice.
How about you, Kiran? Did you do much reading?
To begin with, I was on those streaming devices, Netflix, but I unfortunately live with the illustrator for my next book, and we had a deadline coming up, and so I couldn't sort of hide from them because they are my husband, and so he's very much was like, Eoin didn't just sort of business as usual, is used to working at home. He's not the most social either. He's a bit of a hermit, so he quite enjoyed it, whereas I am very social, and I like, I have friends over the river, for example, who I couldn't go and see, who I normally go and write with, because they're writers too, and things like that. So I definitely get my energy from other people, and I found it quite difficult. But eventually it all came back, and I realized that writing actually makes me incredibly happy, and there's a reason it's my job and I love it. So I started to get back into writing, but my way into that was by reading, because there's so much choice, I think, with television and films, that actually sometimes turning to a book, it's a way to sort of avoid getting overloaded. I sometimes find all the choice and the stimulation too much. So I really enjoyed going back to my bookshelves and either rereading old favourites or catching up. As authors, we get sent lots of lovely books. So I really enjoyed sort of catching up on some of the newer stuff that's been coming out. So I've like Eoin, I've been very lucky and had a nice time. No dependents other than a husband and a cat. So it's not been bad.
And that's a nice point, that you did a lot of writing, and a lot of the reading that you did helped you to write. And I wanted to ask all three of you, maybe start with Cressida, do you have any tips for young people who are interested in writing? And especially with lockdown, when everything's a bit strange, sometimes starting with a blank sheet of paper can be quite difficult. So could you give us some reading tips? Cressida, I could ask you to some writing tips.
Yes, I can, but I also want to answer the previous question, only because I've spent the whole of lockdown. I don't have any. I have older children. Actually, one of them you can't see, but is painting in the background here in the kitchen. But so mine are all older. But I felt a responsibility as a laureate to try and get kids reading, and saw this as a time. So I've been reading. I want to say this because it's been quite a lot of work. I'm now on to book 6. This is book 6. During lockdown, I've been reading the whole of the How to Train Your Dragon series, and so I think, and a bit like Owen, I think it is a time when children have been turning to books more and realizing and we've all seen the stats about books being good for mental health or treating children who read. So I think that's a wonderful thing. Anyway. So I was just saying, please check it out on YouTube, because I've been reading them on YouTube, and it's lovely also that publishers were allowing us to do that. Normally you wouldn't be allowed to do that, but publishers have sort of allowed authors to do that. And I totally agree with Kiran. I think reading is a great Kickstarter for giving you ideas. But the blank sheet of paper, reading can give you ideas. And I always say, try and write what you would like to. Don't think it has to be like an essay that you do for school. You haven't got to put in your wow words. You haven't got to, this is just you having fun. Write what you would like to read. If I go back and look at and try and find out what I was writing age 9, there was absolutely no sign of a future children's laureate. I can tell you, it was messy. It was highly derivative of Enid Blyton, which was book. So just write what you would want to read. And research is the other thing, which sounds so posh, research. But go on the internet and find out about something. Sharks. Find out about sharks, and the more you find out about sharks, you're like, oh my goodness, sharks are extraordinary. They have very sensitive noses, and that will give you an idea for a story. So I find research, even in books or on the internet, it's a great stuff. Or draw a map of your imaginary place and write a story about it.
Back to maps. Can I ask you a nosy question, Cressida? Because you've written lots and lots of books, when you've been reading How to Train Your Dragon aloud, do you ever find that there's a surprise in it for you now, or do you remember the whole thing?
No! Oh my goodness, I keep on being terribly surprised. Oh my goodness, I totally forgotten this bit. Yes, and it's quite, actually, I shouldn't say, but I do find myself, I am enjoying it. So I laugh very loudly, and I know that's very conceited.
No, I think that's brilliant.
But that's a good sign, isn't it? You sort of got to enjoy your own work, haven't you? Because if you don't enjoy it, if you aren't moved by it, if you can't make yourself cry or laugh or think, how are you going to do that for anybody else? Can I, just to make myself feel better, do you guys make yourself laugh or cry when you're writing? Yes.
More than anyone else.
Well, Kiran, can I ask you for some tips for young writers who are really keen to start imagining their own worlds?
Yeah, my top tip is always blank pages scare me, and I have a couple of cheats that I use. One is that I draw maps, like Cressida says. So one of the ones that I actually created when I was in Scotland on a very rainy holiday with no internet, and this became the basis for The Way Past Winter, which is my 3rd book. And I knew I just wanted it to be a journey going north. So they're very basic maps. I'm not an illustrator by any means. But it makes the blank page a bit less scary. And then my plan is just very basic, just words with arrows saying what the landscape is they're moving through. And that was based on Scandinavian myths, which I loved then researching and getting into sort of a whole sort of falling down that rabbit hole of interesting facts. Another one is if you're using a computer to write, which I do because I hold my pen very strangely. Actually had to wear a neck brace when I was doing my 11 plus because I hold my pen so strangely. I will fill a whole page with just gobbledygook, just so that I don't have a blank page to to write into. I will literally, or I'll write a paragraph and then copy and paste it 100 times so that my document says 5,000 words or 100 words. And then suddenly I've written 100 words, even though I've actually written nothing at all. So I will trick myself. You probably don't have to do that if it's not your job. You probably should be writing something that you're really excited to get to. But sometimes when you're writing, it's a bit hard to get going. So just cheat as much as you need to.
That's an excellent tip. Also nice to know that being somewhere rainy can be quite inspiring for a writer, because I think that's quite often the experience in the UK and Scotland. Well, I think we'll finish the question about inspiration with Eoin, since Eoin is smug and has written lots and lots during lockdown, so he'll have the absolute answers.
I don't think so. I do have a few tricks though. I think as an ex-teacher, you're always trying to help kids write essays. And one of the things I realized was that kids are very often very anxious about starting. So they just don't want to do the first, how their story opens. And that's confusing to them. So I always say, kids, write the scene you're excited about. You don't have to write the first scene. You can write any scene. And if you're here to write a story, you must have some scene in your head. So go directly to that. And by the time you've written that scene, you'll probably be in the groove, and it'll be no problem for you to go back and do the first page. And that's what I do anyway. Once I finish my plan, I don't start at the beginning and write to the end. I write what I'm feeling excited about that day. And it does help me to keep a little bit of freshness in it. If you write about something you're just thinking about, because if you have to wait 6 months until you get to that part in the story, you've thought about it 100 times, and then maybe it's not quite as sparky as it might have been. And I don't have the confidence in my writing that the Kiran and Cressida have, because when I read my stuff, I'm literally editing it as I go during a reading with kids, and they're like, "That's not what's in the book, Mr. Colfer." And I say, "You shut your face. Get out of my reading." Yeah, it's okay. It's my own child, so it's fine. I don't. And it must be some kind of insecurity. But anytime I read anything, I'm going, "Oh my God, why would you write that down?" You know, that's terrible. So no one else is looking at this, right? I'm just talking to you two.
Yeah.
It's a circle of trust.
Yeah, we won't tell anybody.
Well, that brings us though very neatly on.
You're great, Eoin.
I know when I'm being patronised. I know.
That does bring us on really nicely though, Eoin, to ask if you would read for us. And if you would tell us a little bit about the foul twins.
Sorry, that was exceptionally cruel.
I know, and I have all the words here so I can check that you're not editing.
I'm actually going to read a bit from the second twins book, which is not out, so that's just kind of a proof. So this book is called The Foul Twins, Deny All Charges. The Foul Twins are two 12-year-old, well, obviously they're both 12, Irish boys who have inherited a criminal mastermind empire from their brother Artemis, who has been shot into space, so he can't make a surprise cameo. So this little piece just tells us a little bit about Miles and Beckett. That's the two twins, and Miles is the brainy one and Beckett is the active one. But as is often the case when one criminal mastermind launches himself into space, there is another ready to take his place. And in this instance, the replacement mastermind was Artemis's own younger brother, Miles, who was, if anything, even more condescending towards the world than Artemis had been when he lived in it. On Miles's blog, Miles to Go, he regularly disparaged noticed scientists with comments like, "Leonardo knew about as much about flying machines as I know about boy bands," or "Regarding Einstein's devotion to the Big Bang Theory, please, his version of the theory has more hypotheticals than the televisual show of the same name and is almost as funny." This comment did not endear him to Albert Einstein's legions of fans. He also skewed humanity in general on the blog through a series of editorials, including the scathing, "Dear Internet, 1 billion hysterical opinions do not carry the weight of a single fact." The comments following this article ran into tens of thousands without one smiley face in the bunch. Fortunately for social media's blood pressure, Miles' acerbic nature was tempered somewhat by the presence of his twin brother Beckett, who was of a sunnier disposition, or as Miles often put it, "Where I see the dispersion of light in water droplets, Beck sees a rainbow. Though he could never stop himself from qualifying this remark with, although anyone who has so much as flipped through a meteorology text can tell you there is no bow involved. This remark demonstrated that Miles Fowle had about as much of a sense of humour as a Vulcan, and that he was possibly in the top 5% of smug people on the planet, and in the top 1% of smug 12-year-olds overall. Beckett was in many respects his siblings' total opposite, and had they not been related, it seemed unlikely that they would have enjoyed each other's company. But in the way of twins, the boys loved and protected each other even unto death and occasionally beyond. For Beckett's part, he safeguarded Miles using his physicality, a sphere in which Miles had about as much prowess as a piece of sod. He was forever tripping over footpaths and falling upstairs, which is almost a skill. On one occasion, a group of Albert Einstein devotees rushed Miles at the school gate, brandishing hardback copies of The Meaning of Relativity, and Beckett dispatched them by stuffing several sticks of gum into his mouth and cartwheeling towards them while chewing noisily. He did this because Miles had once told him that people with high IQs tend to suffer from misophonia, which is a visceral reaction to certain sounds, the number one culprit being loud chewing. Beckett's gum trick sent the Einstein disciples packing, but it also disoriented Miles, who walked into a gate and had to have stitches in his forehead as a result. So, a mixed outcome, all in all. That is a little...
Thanks. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. Is that true about people with high IQs and misophonia?
Yeah, it's very true. I get it so badly, so bad because of my... Thank you for setting me up for that. Thank you. No, it is true. It is true.
Are Miles and Beckett identical?
No, they're very close. Which are the ones that are not identical? Is that fraternal?
Fraternal.
Fraternal. So they're the world's only conjoined fraternal twins. Yep. So they were just joined together at the wrist, and they have matching scars which they bump. It's kind of their high five. Oh. So they're very, very close. And there's all sorts of theories about the shared brain in the womb now, which is coming up now, so it's kind of all feeding directly into my plan. So it's like you said, Cressida, researching.
Okay. Owen, I know this is a fine thing for somebody who writes about dragons to say, but seriously, can you be fraternal twins and also conjoined?
They are it's never happened. That's what I'm saying. Let me just put on my glasses to make it look more sciencey.
Yeah.
Okay. How dare you impute my... No. It shouldn't happen, but these are the first twins that it's happened to. That's why they're so special. They have a special, almost psychic.
Yeah. You're quite right. Unlikely, but not impossible.
There you go. Do you like the glasses? Really sell it, though, don't they? Because when I take off the glass, I'm going, that's not true. Oh, it is true. So,
you need to get me some.
Yeah.
They don't have glasses.
Well, that brings me neatly on to my next question, which is about how you all visualise your characters, because obviously Cressida draws her characters as well as writes them. And Eoin, I might start with you and then ask Kiran and then Cressida. Do you have a really strong picture in your head of what your characters look like and what all of your settings look like? Do you ever draw them?
When I was in school, a younger guy, I wanted to be a graphic novel artist and write my own graphic novels and illustrate them. And then I suffered from the unfortunate condition of being rubbish. So I had to abandon that plan. So I've always kept that, the visual element. So people often say to me, my books are quite cinematic, which is debatable, but I think they're actually graphic. So when I'm writing a book, I'm seeing it like a graphic novel. And originally I did have my own pictures, but then I started to work with the wonderful Andrew Donkin and Giovanni Rigano, and we did the graphic adaptations of Artemis, and that has completely supplanted my own vision. Gio, Cressida, he's so good. He's so brilliant that his versions of my characters have just taken over. So I'm very lucky in that respect. But any of the characters he hasn't drawn for me, I do have a very strong image of what I want them to look like.
That's fascinating. Kiran, could I ask you the same question?
I also have a very visual brain without the skill to translate it onto paper, but I do write as though I'm watching a film. That's completely how, when I get to later drafts, once I know the landscape I'm writing, once I know my characters a bit better, I do just sort of plonk them down in that landscape and let them run off. And I'm sort of, my husband has filmed me while I'm typing, and I do look a bit strange because I'm just sort of looking over the top of the computer monitor, sort of going, I am seeing them in my mind's eye. And that sort of allows that pace to come through that I always really enjoy in books, and all that texture as well that you get from film and television and visual mediums and graphic novels. I grew up reading the Mahabharata, which is a epic Indian myth, and I read it all in graphic novels. My mum was trying to raise me bilingual. That didn't work because I just looked at the pictures. But that was, I learned that pictures could tell you a story. And so, yes, it's great sadness to me that I am not that way talented, but I do love consuming that type of media still, and highly illustrated works. And I definitely, when I read Eoin's books, things like The Wish List and obviously Artemis Fowl, you definitely get that sense that is the way you write. I remember in The Wish List that the tunnel, that terrified me and my brother, because we listened to the audiobook initially and it was traumatizing. So thank you.
You're welcome. I like to think there's kids all over the world traumatized. That's my job.
I can guarantee it. Yeah.
I was going to say that I'm jealous of children today because children's books are so amazing, but I'm not jealous of being traumatized, so maybe that's just as well. But Cressida, could I ask you about how you work? Do you draw first? Does it all come together, or do you write and then draw?
I do it sort of simultaneously. I come from both backgrounds. I went to art school as well as reading English at university, so I really am properly both. So I will draw out the characters and draw maps of the locations and before I start, but I don't know which comes first. I have big sketchbooks filled with drawings of the characters. And by the way, Illegal is one of my favourites of yours. I love that book. Yeah, that's wonderful. If anybody,
I can't take all the credit for that. That was
I know.
But you're not here, so it was mostly me.
Yeah.
I apologize, Andrew.
But just to say to any kid watching who is worried, I haven't got a great visual memory. So actually, when I was little, and my children actually, they all have much better visual memory than I do, and they laugh when I drew a pear with a stalk on the wrong end of it. So don't think that there's only one way to be an illustrator. We're not all like, Chris Riddell has magnificent, he can draw you an elephant from his own memory. But, you can do things. I've learned to get better. This is the thing. Don't think that you have to be brilliant at everything right from the beginning. It is about learning. I went to art school for 4, longer. So, and I think that goes for writing as well. We all, I think children put a lot of pressure on themselves. I remember drawing Snoopy, and I used to get so cross with myself because I could never make it as good as the real Snoopy. And I forgot, it didn't, because I thought, that means I'm never going to be an illustrator. And it didn't mean that, it meant I was only 9. Don't forget, you're only 9, I think that's a real tip to kids that I would give. But I think of things at the same time. Really.
Sometimes when children when they get a bit older, they start to not be so confident at drawing and writing, don't they?
Writing, because I get upset about this, because the whole spelling and, physically, can you, that's why I made Wish, who's one of the heroes in Wizards of Once, dyslexic. It was the Bronze Ages. They didn't call it dyslexia, but I know she was dyslexic. And because I think it can be so demoralizing. Children can see it as a race, and it isn't about that. It's about your ideas. At the end of the day, it's not about your spelling, is it, Eoin?
No.
Nobody's interested in the spelling, really, are they?
Well, I know that because most people spell my name wrong. So my favorite when I'm in the States and you come down the escalator and they have the sign with your name on it. I like that because every day I'm someone else. And my favorite is Eoin Colfer, which is like a hairdresser to the stars. And it's much better than my name. But you're right, spelling is not important. It's a sad thing in educational systems and among peer pressure with kids themselves is that as they get a little bit older, they start to feel like writing stories is childish. And we should stop this now, and we should play football or do whatever, and not write stories about criminal masterminds or fantasy worlds anymore, or dragons, and we should be more grown up. And I think that's a terrible shame. And I bet we lose some of our greatest storytellers because they feel like, oh, I can't be writing stories. I got to be outside chopping down trees and putting a hole in the ozone layer or whatever they need to do, and they stop writing stories, which is a bit of a tragedy.
I think I definitely fell victim to that. I was quite a perfectionist and I put a lot of pressure on myself to do the right thing at school. And I used to write stories all the time. And this is not something I remember about myself. It's something my mum was told me when I came back to writing about 10 years ago now. And she said, oh, but you used to write all the time. And I just didn't remember that because I assumed I wasn't good enough. So why put time into that? Because I wasn't good enough. But if I'd used those, 15 years that I essentially just stopped writing, then think how good I'd be now. So I always say, to kids who are thinking maybe they might want to be a writer, or even if you don't, keep it up because you never know what the future is going to hold. And it is a craft, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And, the same goes for your imagination. So I really regret that pressure I put on myself, and I wish I'd lightened up on myself a bit more.
And don't compare yourself. I remember thinking, oh my goodness, Lord of the Rings is amazing. I can't do that, so why would I bother doing anything? But there's only one Lord of the Rings, but there's only one you, so you be you and do your own thing. And as Cressida said, you don't have to be professional level at 9. You've got a long way to go. So take it easy on yourself. It's a space where you're supposed to enjoy it. It's supposed to be good for your mentally, writing your own story, get it out on a page. So don't beat yourself up. Just relax and enjoy it and have fun. Well, that's what I do.
And that brings us nicely to ask Kiran, perhaps, to tell us a bit about your new book and perhaps read us, I think you're only going to read us a tiny little snippet to give us a taste of it.
So this is my new book that's not out yet. It's not out for a month. It's out on the 1st of October. And this will be my 4th book for younger readers, sort of 8 to 12 and anyone over that as well too. And it's set this time in the Italian city of Siena, which I thought I visited for the first time 5 years ago with my parents-in-law and my husband. But actually, I took my first steps in the Piazza del Campo, another thing that I didn't remember that my parents had to sort of hint me at. And this follows Sophia, and she lives with her mother, who is an ossuarist, and that is someone who builds things out of bones. And their whole house is crafted of bones. And her mother also has a very special secret skill that no one can find out about, because everyone will want it. But then one day someone does, and her mother goes missing, and Sophia must set out across the city to find her missing mother. So I'm just going to read you from the opening. Just have a piece of paper that's still got my edits on it, because this hasn't actually gone to the printers yet. So if you spot a mistake, please tell me. Feedback welcome. In the grounds of a ruined monastery, on the outskirts of Siena, a girl awoke in a charnel house. All about her were skeletons. By the thin shafts of light flitting in from the slits in the ribcage shutters, she could see the bed about her, built from tibias and fibulas. Her mother and brother's beds an echo along the other walls. A moon-white skull, still warm from last night's fire, was cupped over her feet. Over her head draped a canopy of gold-dipped toe bones in great gilded wreaths, and teeth were set like stars in the chinks in the walls. But the girl was not afraid. This house of old and golden bone was her home, and today was her 12th birthday. I think Owen has passed out with how great that was.
Yeah, Owen's just jealous, so he's left us. I think Owen's maybe had a problem with his internet and he'll rejoin us very soon. I don't think he's really gone off in a huff. I don't think that's true. But since we've lost Owen for a couple of minutes, maybe that would be a really good time to start asking you some questions, because I have an iPad here with lots of questions from the young people listening. And
I can be Owen.
You can be Owen. You can say whatever you like. He's not here yet, so so I'm going to start with a question for you two first. Do you get any ideas for characters from real people?
Cressida, do you want to?
Yes.
Admit?
Yes, I do. I mean, it's not. It's not like they're completely. I then take them into another direction, and you sort of change them. But yes, I mean, Stoic the Vast, Hiccup's father, was very much inspired by my relationship with my father, and he has many characteristics that are quite similar to my dad. My dad was very pompous, you know, so Stoic's quite pompous and has that rather endearing pomposity, and I adored my father but wasn't a bit like him, and my dad was somebody who wasn't very chatty, who didn't talk about his feelings very much, and so that relationship very much, I take a lot of. Because I think for a book or anything to resonate and to really mean something to somebody else, you have to put true things into it and true feelings, and for things to be so. I'm quite open about doing that with myself. So my own feelings of inadequacy measuring up to my father, I absolutely put it into Hiccup, because otherwise, how on earth is it going to mean something to somebody else? Or I'm trying to think. Wish actually is the character who's most like me. I put a lot of myself into Wish. She's very messy, very. So
lovely.
So yes, I do that a lot. What about you, Kiran?
I've become more and more confident with it. To begin with, it was something, you know, I didn't think that was something you did. I thought that, you know, you had to invent everything. And then even in my first couple of drafts for The Girl of Ink and Stars, I realised how wrong I was, and that actually write what you know makes sense, because it's not about writing what you know. You know, Cressida didn't grow up with dragons, as far as I know, and oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. and I didn't grow up on an island that was sort of threatened by this fire demon. But what I do recognise was loving my home and loving my family, and understanding that while I might not see myself as a traditionally brave person, I could be brave for the people I loved. And so that is a lesson that I've taken forward into all my books. And I think finally with A Secret of Birds and Bone, my next book, I have finally stepped into that. And Sophia is probably the character who is most like me of all my books. And I'm quite comfortable with that now. I'm quite comfortable with giving her my strengths, my weaknesses, and looking at myself in that way. I think it's quite a brave thing to do, to be able to see yourself that clearly.
Well, that leads on brilliantly to another question here, which is, what's the scariest thing you've ever done? Cressida?
Well, I did lots of scary things as a child. Again, I'm going back to Hiccup and Stoic, without really intending to. Like, I wasn't asked my opinion, as was the fashion in the 1970s. You didn't really ask the kids what they thought. You just took along. So I was taken out a lot. I mean, unlike here, I really did spend a lot of time on this island off the west coast of Scotland. That was a real place. That was the inspiration for the Isle of Burke. And so we were taken out in storms a great deal. So probably the scariest things I did were things like that, going out in storms where,
Especially on the west coast of Scotland, we can have some
Yes.
terrifying storms.
Not the Mediterranean.
Not the Mediterranean, indeed. Owen, you're back. We lost you there for a minute or two, so can I ask you what's the
I think
scary...
something to do with Brexit. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely. Hard border. Can we ask you, Owen, what is the scariest thing? This is a question from a listener. What is the scariest thing you've ever done?
I think the first, I found public speaking really tough early on. So when I started off, and I had been doing okay in Ireland, then suddenly, when Artemis Fowl came out, I was doing events in Piccadilly Square, and I found that very frightening. And I used to be with the essential oils, spraying myself, going in and putting drops, trying to calm down.
Lavender.
Yeah, whatever I could get, I used all of that. But I've been doing it for so long now, it doesn't really, I don't get that scared anymore. I think physically the scariest thing I ever did was do a parachute jump. And I know, but
so impressed.
I know, and this was not my choice, Cressida. My wife gave me as a gift a parachute jump. I was wondering, why would you?
Sign here on your life insurance.
I know. She said, no, you've always wanted to do a parachute jump. I don't remember wanting to do that.
Well, you do now.
I did it. I thought they were going to tie me to somebody and then we would go out with the person, but they didn't do that. They just.
Did you have to pull a little cordy thing?
Oh,
yourself?
you're attached to a lead, and you fall down, and so I did that, and I was going down. I thought, thank God, and then I got a little voice in my ear, and it said, "Mr. Colfer, I don't want to upset you, but your lines are tangled."
Oh my gosh!
I thought it was God. I said, "Yes, Lord." He said, "Just look up," and I looked up, and it was like swing when you're a kid. And he said, "Just kick out of it now, nice and gently." He was so calm, and so I just swung around as if I was, on the swing when you're a kid, and it was fine. But for those few minutes, you do realize, it's not theoretical. Mortality is real. It's coming up to meet me. So that was but I found speaking publicly more scary than that for the first few years. So I understand when people get very nervous going on stage. I'm okay now after 25 years doing it, so it's fine.
What about you, Kiran?
I actually really love adrenaline fueled things. So I love like bungee jumps and, high wire stuff and roller coasters. I do really, and horror films, love horror films. But there's a couple of times I've been really scared. The caving thing that Cressida was saying at the beginning, that brought it up for me. Because we were taught at school that any space this big you could fit through. So they told us that as a fact, okay? And everyone's fingers stretch a different amount anyway, because they were like, that's the size of your head and your rib cage, everything else is squishy bits. So I used this when we went on holiday in Wales with my brother and my dad and my mum, but my mum doesn't like that sort of stuff. And I got stuck. And
were you just impromptu caving?
Yeah, we were just caving. We were just
what? No official anything, Kiran?
No, just with my dad.
Oh my God.
All my bad stories are with my dad. He just doesn't plan. He just goes. I got out eventually, but I was there for about 10 minutes, stuck in a dip in the rock with my dad behind and my brother pulling me from in front.
About that.
And the other, yeah, exactly. I was like, but it says I could fit. That's not true. And the other time was also with my dad when I was at the beach with my dad and my brother and I were on a Lido, and we started getting pulled out by the tide. And my dad thought we were waving, but we weren't. And I was kicking. I think I was about 10 and my brother was 7, so he was on the Lido while I was kicking. And I managed to keep us in the bay, but only just. And it's North Norfolk, so there's quite a strong rip sometimes out there. So my dad is not to be relied upon.
Yeah, that sounds like the end of Titanic. You're on the bed. I'm sorry.
Yeah, my brother was just like chilling. He was fine. He was like, "Sis has got this."
It also sounds a little bit like you had a real life version of that illustration that Cressida showed us at the very beginning. Have you stuck in that cave, Hovey?
I know, it was hugely triggering.
Sorry about that. I had no idea.
That was unplanned. Well, let's turn to more positive questions. And can I ask you each, which is your favourite of the books that you have written? Eoin, can I start with you?
It's a tough one. I've written, I think, 40-something books now, but I always like the collaborations, and I think that's because I get to work with people I really respect and admire. And that's one of the nice things about having Artemis Fowl in your CV, is that you can ring people up and at least they will take the call. And so I've worked with PJ Lynch, the wonderful PJ Lynch. We did a book called The Dog Who Lost His Bark, which did really well last year. And I worked with Oliver Jeffers, and we did a book called Imaginary Fred, and that was great. But my favorite, I would have to say, is Illegal, which is a book about the migration of children from Africa to Europe. And it's in all of these worldwide tragedies, it's always the kids that get it the hardest, and it's always the kids who have nothing to do with the problem, and it's so unfair. So that was Andrew's idea, that we do a book about that. And I'm not usually kind of an issues guy, but we just felt that was a problem, international problem, that we couldn't really ignore. And it's been such an eye-opener for us to go around and meet with a lot of migrant groups who are in various cities in the US and the UK, and just to hear what they had to go through. Some of these kids have walked across the Sahara Desert. It's like, it's unbelievable. So I'm really proud of that book, and I'm allowed to be proud of it because I didn't do it on my own. I did it with Andrew and Gio. So otherwise, if you're proud of your own work in Ireland, that's just not a good thing.
No. Very similar here in Scotland.
Yeah, no. So I would say Illegal would be my number one at the moment.
Thanks. Eoin, Cressida, which is your favourite?
Well, luckily I'm neither Scottish nor Irish, so I can be just as proud as I like. Actually, my husband's Scottish, so he tells me off for being too proud, too conceited. Too proud? Too proud. Yeah, I like to say, there's another word. I like to be confident. Yeah, confident. It's my latest. It's always my latest one, because I like to think, because I am a funny mixture. I am proud, but then also I'm always trying to improve. I'm always, every single book, I put pressure on myself to be better than the last one, to be funnier, to be cleverer, to be, I don't know. So, and I do think I'm getting better. I do think, I feel that I'm getting better as I go along. So, the illustrations have got much more. I told you I'm not naturally, I haven't got a great visual memory, but I think my illustrations have got more complex and more, anyway, I think I'm getting better. So, the latest one.
Do you ever feel sad leaving a book behind, Cressida?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I weep. And particularly when it's the last in the series. Yeah, no,
I was quite sad when you said that.
Like anything. I know. I cried like anything, and there's a particular illustration where at the end of this one where Perdita, one of his characters, is saying anyway goodbye to the walking boots that are going after the. I'm giving things away, aren't I?
You are.
Anyway, this illustration, I'll show you the illustration that actually made me cry. This is like, for me, saying goodbye to the book. Okay, that's Perdita. She's one of the wizards, and her walking boots are going after the greater giant, and she's staying. Anyway, so that's me sort of saying goodbye to the book, and that I cried back at the air. I find it very difficult to leave, particularly. I mean, that's probably, 12 books, Hiccup, that was hard. But this one, I found it really hard. I sort of had to end it because I'd started with this really dynamic story arc, and I couldn't, but I don't really want to leave. I've got to be honest.
But good news for the reader that there's another one, and it's on early release here, isn't it, at the book festival? So anybody listening can go over to the bookshop and they can get it before it's actually out in the shops on the book festival site.
We always do that for Edinburgh, especially because I'm always coming out in And because Edinburgh has because of the Scottish, because of How to Train Your Dragon being based on the Inner Hebrides, we always try and do that. So only for the Edinburgh Festival you can specially buy the book. I don't know how you're doing it now, but yeah, online. Are you?
Online. Yeah. So you can head over when the event is finished and you can find all Kiran's books, Eoin's books and Cressida's book, including the new one, on the festival bookshop. So once the event's over, I hope you'll read them with great joy. They're absolutely brilliant. So Kiran, that leaves me very quickly. We've only got a couple of seconds left. Which is your favourite of your books?
But my titles are so long.
Your titles are too long.
Probably it is. I'm like Cressida. I like my latest book to be my best book, and I am. So A Secret of Birds and Bone, I think, is my best book. I think it's my most exciting book, my most textured book. But I'm really excited. We'll soon be announcing the book that I'm doing in collaboration with my husband. And just like Eoin was saying, I think working with someone else, it really brings the best out of me. And so I'm definitely looking to do more of those in the future. So that will be announced really soon by my publisher.
And on that note, I think that having the three of you here has really brought out the best in all of you. And there's nothing left for me to say, but I hope everybody listening has enjoyed this event as much as I have. And a huge thank you to you all from Edinburgh International Book Festival Online for joining us today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.